There's obviously a lot of talk right now about the coronavirus, and for good reason. We are seeing more and more cases across Asia, some in Europe, and even here in the U.S. Now, some people are saying we're making too big a deal out of it if you consider that 80,000 people died from the flu last year. So whether or not you want to say this is a health or a medical crisis, that can be debated by the medical experts. But I'm going to tell you another place it's having a very serious impact: economically. That's right, economically. 5 million companies across the world could be impacted by the coronavirus. 1,000 of those companies are U.S.-based. I'm talking about companies you think about every day: McDonald's, Burger King, Apple. When you talk about a big consumer-facing global company, you know where their growth plan is? China. And I'm not just talking about companies that have a presence in China. As I said, Nike, Starbucks, a lot of their stores are being temporarily closed, or some banks in the region are having employees leave. I'm talking about U.S. companies that are dependent on supply chain. They need all different materials coming from China, and right now, that is backlogged. And then one I'm going to say is probably the most obvious: travel. For people in mainland China, for people in Hong Kong, they've already been told stay out of crowded areas. You might not want to take a train or a subway. But let's talk about tourists. If you are about to get on a plane, a train, use the subway, there's more and more concern. We know that masks have already sold out, but people are suddenly saying, I'm not even going to travel to the region. So when you think about how that is impacting the hotel industry, the cruise industry, this is going to have a big economic impact for months to come.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.